Welcome back to Gillette Stadium, everybody. My name is Mike Petraglia, joined as always by Patriots expert columnist for WEEI.com, Christopher Price. Okay, Bill Belichick started off Wednesday talking about how this is the grind of training camp. It's like this every single year, Chris, and on Wednesday it manifested itself in a little bit of a dust-up. Brandon Browner, not only with Kenbrell Thompkins, the wide receiver he's been matched up against for most of training camp, but also Jimmy Garoppolo yelling at the rookie quarterback. But I think what stood out the most was about 30 minutes in, he was yelling at an assistant coach. That would be wide receivers coach Chad O'Shea. Your take on what you saw out there on the field, what do you make of it all?
I think some of it, you can chalk up to the fact that you talked about the grind, you talked about the frustration level. At this point of the year, you get in camp, you spend a week plus in camp, you're hitting the same guys over and over again. Can you just imagine what it would be like if they didn't have the joint practices, by the way?
Right.
It's just part of it, I think, is that because his ire wasn't directed at one guy. If it was directed at one guy, if he just went head-to-head with KT and they got in a dust-up, then that would lead me to believe that there's something there between those two guys. But Browner had it in for multiple guys today,
right?
And that leads me to believe that there's some frustration level there just because it's that point in camp. Guys are just getting used to each other. Guys are sick and tired of hitting the same guys day after day after day. But there's also some, I don't want to say frustration, but I think there's some sense of how far he can go in this defense. Well, when it comes to being more physical, when it comes to his overall approach, when it comes to how he can play here as opposed to the way he played in Seattle. Because you remember in Seattle, they were a very physical group of cornerbacks. I wonder how they're going to be able to marry that philosophy, Browner's philosophy, what he brings in here, with what they've done for several years.
I know you asked Brandon Browner exactly that question. What kind of adjustment is it from Seattle, where it was all, the Legion of Boom, that whole mentality really was felt literally throughout the secondary. Will it be like that for him here?
I think they have to find some sort of common ground. I think that he needs to maybe dial back a little bit of the physicality, and I think, quite frankly, the Patriots need to ratchet it up a little bit. Some of those other defensive backs need to ratchet it up a little bit to be able to meet that level. So I think if they meet somewhere in the middle, Belichick talked yesterday about the fact that, when guys come in here, we're able to kind of glean new things, approaches, techniques, methodology, styles. I think that is going to come into play a little bit when you're talking about Brandon Browner within the context of this game.
We had a chance after practice, both to their credit, both Brandon Browner and Kenbrell Thompkins addressed the media. We asked Brandon Browner, he said what was particularly of note, look, it happens between players, we're just going to all talk it out. It's not that big a deal, but I do regret what I did with Chad O'Shea. That's unprofessional and cannot happen, period.
And he said, we hugged it out after. So it appears that that's kind of water under the bridge at this point. It's going to be interesting, though, to watch those one-on-ones, because they provided some great theater over the last couple of days. When you're talking about the wide receivers going up against the defensive backs, there have been some really great battles. Revis, Edelman, Browner, KT. It's been a lot of fun to watch. I wonder if they're going to dial back a little bit when it comes to the intensity of those workouts.
Asked Kenbrell Thompkins that exact question, Chris, and I said, did you hug it out like Brandon said? No, we'll talk it out. So let's move on to some of the repetitions that we saw. I know Ryan Hannibal, a writer for WEEI.com, pointed this out, and I thought it was a very interesting point. Brandon LaFell was over on the other field working with Ryan Mallett in the 2s and the 3s, while Kenbrell Thompkins has been getting a lot of snaps in with the 1s. What do you make of that?
I think when you look at what they both bring to the field, and when you talk about those two wide receivers, you also have to talk about the fact that Aaron Dobson was not here. And I wonder how Dobson would figure into that mix. I think the thing when you're talking about LaFell, maybe working with the 2s and the 3s today, LaFell has some more positional versatility than KT does. In Carolina, he's lined up in the slot. He's played almost kind of a tight end role over his first few years in the league with the Panthers. So maybe they're trying to figure out what to do with him. Where he works best with kind of with the 2s and 3s, and kind of get a sense from those guys there before moving him up with the 1s. I also wonder, frankly, how many reps KT would be getting with the 1s if Aaron Dobson was out here working on a regular basis. KT has done very well to take advantage of those reps to this point. But again, you wonder about the overall use and where he would be in the pecking order of the depth chart if Aaron Dobson was out.
Let's move to the other side of the ball defensively. I know you're working on a piece for WEEI.com on the pass rush and how important it is for the Patriots to not only sustain but improve. Are they improved? I know you spoke at length with Rob Ninkovich. I had a chance to talk to Chandler Jones. Chandler Jones says that this defense has a chance for great things because it's another year of experience with mostly the same guys along the defensive line and on the edge, and he was raving about Rob Ninkovich. What did Rob Ninkovich tell you about the potential of this pass rush to be better?
Well, I think he echoed a lot of the same thoughts that Bill had earlier when we talked to him earlier this morning about finding a balance of learning how to play together as complementary defensive ends. It's a process, and you have to be able to know the strengths and weaknesses of the opposing defensive end and know that you can't both pin your ears back and go after the quarterback, because if he's a good quarterback, he's just going to step up and avoid the rush that way. I think two things when you're talking about this pass rush that come to mind. First of all, Chandler and Ninko have had another year together, and they learn each other's tendencies, and I think they're going to be better off from that perspective. The second thing, obviously, we can't get away from it, is Revis. I think the secondary is going to be better in 2014 than it was in 2013, and as a result, they're going to have more time to get after the corner, or they're going to have more time to get after the quarterback. If that gives Ninkovich and Chandler more time, the fact that Revis and Browner and Arrington and all those guys are on the back end doing what they're supposed to be doing. Look, the Patriots preach team defense better than anyone. I think you're going to see that pay dividends this fall.
But we seem, Chris, to hear about it every single year. The Patriots have to get to the quarterback. They have to have a better pass rush. Are we going to see a breakout year from their pass rush?
I think we're going to see a better year from their pass rush.
Well,
I'll say that.
I don't think a breakout
year. Yeah.
That I think at times last year we saw some of that breakout, but it wasn't consistent. It certainly wasn't 16 or 15 games worth. We saw spurts for 3 or 4 weeks at a time, but then it would die off.
Exactly, and I think when you're talking about needing to be able to bring consistency over a full 16-game season, I think Chandler Jones is one of those guys. Because if you just look at the sack numbers, and it's probably unfair when you're talking about a defensive end to measure him purely on sack numbers, but if you just look at the sack numbers, those numbers have gone up and down over the course of his career. He's gotten his sacks in bunches, and then in other times he's been neutralized by some very good tackles over the course of his career. He needs to be able to step up and emerge not as a superstar, but as a dependable presence, a guy who can get you 10 to 15 sacks a year, do a good job setting the edge, and put pressure on quarterbacks. That's the other thing too. We overrate sacks a little bit when you're talking about the work of a defensive front. I think if you consistently put pressure on a quarterback, I think if you're able to get him off his spot, if you're able to knock him around a little bit, we've seen that over the last couple of years. Denver was able to do that in the AFC Championship game to Tom Brady. The Super Bowl losses. The Giants were able to do that to Tom Brady. If you're able to be physical with a quarterback, knock him off his spot, then that's half the battle right there.
All right, Wednesday is wrapped up here at Gillette Stadium. The Patriots, who were in pads again on Wednesday on the grass fields, will be back at it on Thursday. They'll practice again Friday in the stadium as part of their special in-stadium practice for friends and guests of the organization. And then they will have the weekend off, and then they will head to actually Richmond, Virginia, for a week of practice with the Washington Redskins. He is Christopher Price. I'm Mike Petraglia, outside Gillette Stadium, WEEI.com.